Oh my God, it's a giant. Bro, there's just no way that just happened right now. What's up, guys? It's Cutcarrycast podcast, episode 15, and today we have my good friend Damon Witt on the show today. I've known Damon for over 10 years. We've made a lot of good memories together, whether it be high school bass fishing tournaments back in the day, working on some boats together on his property, or grinding out on Folsom Lake. Damon comes on the show today to share with us some of his backstory and his extensive knowledge of Folsom Lake. Please welcome Mr. Damon Witt. What's going on, Damon? How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on. This is really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is actually the first podcast episode where we're filming it in person. Normally, it's a phone call format, but Damon actually lives local, so he drove out, and we're running 2 microphones today, so I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah, so I know for those that don't know, me and Damon have known each other for quite a while now, and it's pretty funny because I feel like the way we met, we have a mutual friend. Give him a little shout out, Bailey Hurst.
Hey, Bailey.
And Damon knew Bailey obviously before I did, and I met Bailey through the Vista Lago High School Fishing Club, and that's how we ended up meeting. I think 10 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we met at that Orville tournament. Was the first time.
Yeah, I was a boat captain for the high school team, just volunteering, and that's where I met Bailey. I mentored Bailey on fishing early on, and a bunch of other kids in the Vista Lago group. So I've talked to those guys a lot and tried to be as supportive as I could for high school fishing, which is really cool. We didn't really have a high school fishing team when I was a kid growing up in North Texas, and actually they have a team now in my old hometown.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So, yeah, we want to hear a little bit about, you're a little bit of a cowboy. You're from Texas, and kind of what you're doing out there and how you made it out here to California.
Yeah, I grew up in a little bitty small farm town north of Amarillo in North Texas. And, we pond fished mainly. There wasn't a lot of big lakes around there, but we fished all the time. And then my dad was a great fisherman. We always seemed to catch him. And he was really good at catching largemouth for sure. And then I went to school at Texas Tech in Lubbock. And then after that, I moved to Austin for 5 years, and then to Dallas for 5 years. And in those 5 years in Dallas, I really fell in love with the idea of tournament fishing and just fishing all the time. And I fished Lake Fork on a regular basis, Toledo Bend, Sam Rayburn, all the big fish lakes. There was probably 10 lakes within an hour drive of me, so I was always fishing. And which is very different. I never threw a bait in over 15 to 20 feet of water. 20 foot was considered super deep in Texas. And most of the time you were 10, 12 feet. It was even deep to us. So it's when I moved out here in 2000 to California, you're on Folsom Lake, 400 foot deep. You're on Shasta, 900 foot deep, Orville. And you can catch fish down to, I thought it was so foreign fishing that deep, really. And the baits are totally different. And so California is definitely a different fishery. You got the Delta where you could run out to the ocean and get to brackish water and catch striper out there. So it was very different moving out here. But I do love the fishing out here. It's pretty amazing. So when I first got out here, I actually went to Folsom. The first week I was out here, I put my boat on the water. We caught 110 fish. I had a 24-pound bag, which on Folsom, I've never done that since. But I thought this Folsom Lake was the greatest lake ever, and how easy it was to catch fish. And that has definitely changed over the years. It's not the same, and it's mainly because of the water level. Back then they didn't drop the lake down 100 feet or 70 feet or 60 feet. I mean, they kept it full year round, and that's what's changed about Folsom quite a bit. And we could talk about Folsom more, but, I just love fish. I love to tournament fish, and, Folsom's in our backyard, so I fish it a lot. But I fished pro for about 20 years now, on and off. I spent 3 years guiding full-time on all our area lakes, so that's kind of what I've been doing in the fishing world out here.
Yeah, I mean, before we leave kind of the Texas deal, did you do like tournaments out there and any guiding, or was that mainly just once you got to California?
So my dad and I actually were part of a bass club. There weren't many lakes to fish up there, but he introduced me to the bass club when I was like 8 years old, and he and I fished tournaments together until I was 18 and went off to college. Just small little club tournaments, no more than 10 to 15 boats. So that's how I started tournament fishing. And then when I lived in Dallas, I fished 2 tournaments, big ones, before I left. I was in a bass club in Dallas that our bass club would draw 110 boats on the club tournament.
Oh,
and
wow.
we had over 300 members in the club. In my cul-de-sac alone, there was 3 bass boats parked in front of houses. There are so many fishermen in Texas and so many bass boats, and the clubs are huge. I fished a tournament on Ray Roberts that drew 300 boats.
Oh, wow.
And it was just stunning. I mean, that's just how I thought tournament fishing was. Out here, it's a lot different. When I moved out here and parked my boat, I drove around neighborhoods everywhere, and I did not see one bass boat anywhere. So just the sheer number of bass fishermen out here versus Texas is not even close. It's 10 to 1. But, we do have some, and I joined a bass club when I first moved here, and we had 30 members. So it's a big change going from 300 members to a 30-member club. So that was a big difference. Fishing in Texas is, I'd say, very differently, but, I did learn how to power fish originally. Before I ever came out to California, I had to learn how to finesse fish. That's for sure. I didn't own a spinning rod.
Oh, wow.
No, I didn't. I had all my line. When I moved out here that first week, I had no line under 20-pound test. All my rods were flipping sticks. I'd never fished a spinning rod before. I thought they were for perch and crappie and kid fishing. It's very different now.
Yeah, I know talking to Quinn on some of the other episodes that we've had in the past, he said the same thing you've kind of said, that just the amount of bass fishing that goes on in the South and other parts of the country. I mean, it's not even comparable to what we have here on the West Coast. And I know we're making a little bit of a comeback, but it's always been interesting kind of hear about the different types of fishing that goes on over there and just how different it is from the West Coast. I know we have a lot of like versatility out here and different things with our lakes, but just the amount of guys that are stuck up on the bank, like you said, fishing less than 20 feet all year round, and in these other states, I mean, it's just kind of crazy to hear stuff like that since we're used to just how it is out here.
Yeah, I think that's why some of the guys like Skeet Reese and Brent Elder and all those guys, Fred Robanus, Cody Meyer, all those guys that went back east are so much more versatile. Because you could be fishing the Delta, flipping one week. The next week, you're on a tournament on Orville, throwing small baits in 80 feet of water. Going to Shasta, it's such a diverse fishery out here. You have so many different ways to catch fish, and the lakes are all different. So when you go back east, you kind of have an advantage from your versatility, I think. Where, like I said, in Texas, all we did was flip and pitch and throw Carolina rigs all the time, or crank, or jigs. That was it. So I do think this is a great place to become a great fisherman. And if you have a chance to go back east, Aaron Martins was a perfect example of that, and dominate back there. And that's why I think West Coast fishermen are really, really good, especially when they go back. And they face their own challenges learning new lakes and stuff, but they can excel if they go back, for sure.
Yeah, so I know we mentioned earlier in the episode that you've had a lot of involvement in the high school bass fishing stuff, and just honestly a lot in just the community over here in general. What's kind of the story with like how you met Bailey and how you kind of got involved in that high school scene?
So I volunteered to be a boat captain, and it was for Vista Del Lago. And I met Brian Sharp and Brennan, and I met Bailey, helped mentor him. Just a lot of the kids that were in Vista Del Lago, I got to know just by going and boat captaining and meeting the Sharps, who become great friends of mine. And I'm friends with all those people today. And all the younger guys like you and everyone that, you'd come over and help me work on boats. You're always interested in working on your boat. And I started Bass Boat Works about the same time I got into the high school stuff. So I've serviced a lot of boats for the high school fishing team, the Folsom Bass team, and all those guys that I've become friends with over the years. And everyone's kind of still in my life today. Everyone that I mentored or knew has been around this whole time. So we're all good friends. So it's kind of funny watching you guys grow up and become men and become police officers. And, Bailey's living up in Reno now and doing stuff. He did a lot of forest work. It's just everyone I kind of grew up with the high school fishing team, and that was really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's cool, and I think that's been something that's been funny with kind of my whole friend group is we all know Damon. Damon's helped all of us out. Damon's always been around showing us stuff, so I know we all, appreciate what you've done and all those kinds of things. And I think there's a lot of people in this area that obviously know your name, whether it's from, your time at Bass Pro, doing your little seminars and all that kind of involvement that you've had. So you've definitely been around, and your company Bass Boat Works that you've been doing now seems to be kind of the main thing you've been working on, right?
Yeah, I kind of do miss teaching. I spoke for 15 years. I did the ISE shows, but I did Bass Pro Shops, monthly seminars. I did them at Old Galaxy Marine. I did them at CNC Marine. And, having the seminars every month was a great way to talk to a lot of people. And I just love teaching. I love mentoring and teaching bass fishing because it's just an ever-evolving sport. You're always learning something. I don't care how long you've been bass fishing, you're going to learn something tomorrow. And it was just a lot of fun. And I do miss teaching, doing the seminars. But, once I got into Bass Boat Works, and actually I became a swing dance instructor, started teaching swing dancing. So I've taught swing dancing for about 10 years now. So it always seems like there's something going on, and some form of teaching. I like to teach just as much as I like to competitive bass fish and fish the tournaments.
Yeah, you've got that knack, a man of many talents, it sounds like, right?
Either that or I get bored and want to do something new.
right, a little ADD or something. But what's kind of the story of getting into the guide business? I feel like there's a lot of good tournament fishermen. There's a lot of guys out doing it, but I feel like it definitely takes a specific type of person to start guiding and kind of get into that.
You have to be a good teacher. You can be the best fisherman in the world, but that does not mean you're good with people and you're good with teaching. And you got to really share. I decided early on, I will not ever hold back when I teach or I guide. It is constantly showing everybody every trick I got in the book. And some people are like, oh, I can't show someone that spot or I can't show someone that bait. Well, who cares? If they go out and catch fish on their own, that's fine. Our conditions change every day. Just because you catch bait off one spot or with one bait, it could be the best spot you have on the entire lake, but that spot's not great every day. They can go in there, and it's hard to fish other people's fish too. And after guiding, I just said, you know what? I'm never going to hold back teaching. So, and you've got to be able to do that as a guide. I've known a lot of guides. I've seen a lot of guides, how they work with their people on the water, and some of them are really great at it. Like Phil Dutra is a great guide because Phil Dutra, he lived in California. He moved back to Guntersville, and he comes back and guides for a month in the fall. And he's not only just an amazing fisherman, he puts people on fish, he teaches them how to do it, and then he goes back to Guntersville, and he's done great out there too. So, there's certain guides that are just really good, and guides are worth their weight in gold, but they are getting more expensive now. They're not cheap anymore. And I was guiding, I was getting $300 a day. The thing about guiding was I never really made much money guiding. I didn't charge enough, and I wanted to teach. I taught a lot of beginners, to be honest with you, how to get into it as well. If you want to pay $1,000 for a guide for a day, you can. They're top-notch guides, but you're paying for it too. So I never made a ton of money guiding, but I did have a great time. And plus, it was practice for me as well. I was fishing full-time pro for those 3 years, hitting every major tournament. And so the more time I spent on the water, I learned as well. And that's really why I guided. I love to teach, and it helped me practice.
Yeah, it definitely seems that there's a small group of guides, especially in California, that seem to run most of the show, and then there's a lot of kind of just, more one-off kind of situations or whatever the case is. But it definitely seems that that time on the water and just that willingness to show people. I've fished with you a lot, and I have gone on a couple guide trips, and I definitely feel like that's a big part of it, is just having somebody that has that ability to explain, ability to teach, and that willingness to do it. And I think patience is another big aspect, because I'm sure as well as anyone else does that as a guide, you're given a client that has a certain level of skills as a baseline when the day starts, and you have to work with that, right? You can have fish, you can have spots lined up, you can have whatever, but you also have this client that now you need to apply a technique that they can reasonably understand and that they can use to catch the fish, because not everybody's going to be able to do that.
No. And casting was the one thing that it always came down to. That's why I loved when there was a drop shot bite. My clients got drop shots. They're going to catch fish all day. They're probably going to have a shot at a big one, and they can pretty much drop straight down on them. When you're casting, when you're guiding, and you know for a fact there's a 4-pounder sitting right next to that boulder on this drop off, and you ask your client to cast and put your bait right over there, and they miss it by 6 feet to the left side the first cast, 6 feet to the right, throw it real high and plunk it down right there, and it scares the fish. It's like, all right, guys. And my best advice, and I used to do this all the time, go in your pool and practice. Flipping, pitching, get in the backyard, get a little rubber, weight, and just practice. It's one thing that holds fishermen back from exceeding. You better be able to put a cast anywhere you want, with any technique, with any rod, with any line size, if you're going to be good at this. If you really are serious about fishing, practice your casting every day. And I always tell the young kids this: practice. Don't practice on the lake. Practice in your backyard. I used to sit out in front of my house when I had this dream of becoming a pro fisherman when I first moved to California, and I would just take my rod out and cast across the street to the sidewalk and hit little targets on the sidewalk for like 30 minutes every single day. All my neighbors thought I was nuts, but my backyard on my first house wasn't big enough to practice long-range casting. Well, I'd sat there and practiced every day for 30 minutes for about a year. I got to where I could cast pretty darn good just by doing that. So just like anything, you have to practice, because the number one thing that holds young guys back, and some of my guide clients, was being able to put the bait quietly into a spot so they could catch that fish.
Yeah, I feel like the casting thing's huge. I know this summer, especially watching a lot of Bobby Barrick's videos with that frog, I feel like I learned a ton when it comes to like getting your bait exactly where it needs to be, because a lot of those fish, especially with that technique, if you're not getting that frog in that exact pocket where that fish is sitting, you're just not going to catch them, right? Whether you miss your boulder by 6 feet or you miss your frog cast by a foot or two, I mean, it might be the difference between you generating that bite and you getting nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Austin Wilson and I have become really, really good friends. And he's one of the best fishermen on the West Coast, I think. And he's not even bass fishing right now. He's guiding for salmon, steelhead. I think if there was a goldfish and a bull, he'd pull out a rod and try to catch it. He is just so fanatical about fishing, and he's won Angler of the Years. He's won big titles. He just loves to fish. But fishing with him and watching him cast is a thing of beauty, because he can put a frog in a 3-inch little gap between two trees, 2 feet back under that tree, right-handed or from the left side or the right side. It's one thing to be really good from the right side, but he can turn around and do it from the left side and do just as precise. And he's won a couple frog tournaments, finished second in a couple of frog tournaments, and watching him with a frog, or really any bait, his casting ability is stunning. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we've had Mr. Wilson on the show a couple times, and one thing's for sure is I don't even know if that guy's the best bass fisherman on the West Coast. He might be one of the best fishermen on the West Coast in general.
I think for sure. I'd put him up against anybody. I mean, he'll go out on saltwater ocean trips and just destroy everybody with how many fishes he catch. He's part fish. He's got to be.
Yeah, he talks to him for sure. But so obviously you've guided a lot on Folsom. I kind of want to just hear your experience. Obviously you've been out there since the early 2000s, how the lake's kind of changed, what you've noticed, and we'll kind of just talk about Folsom for a little bit.
Folsom is a unique fishery. Of all the fisheries that I've ever fished, the one thing about Folsom, I would say it's a finicky lake. And there's a lot of reasons it's a finicky lake, but and a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with Folsom. I mean, I talk to guys that are like, oh, Folsom, no, I'll never go there. It stinks. I go there and I blank all the time. And it is just one of those lakes that you have to consider the variables before you go into that lake. And what I mean by variables is, before I ever get on the water, and I do this on any lake I go to, but especially Folsom, I look at 5 things before I even get on the lake. What's the water temp right now? How much water is coming down the North Fork, and how much water is coming down the South Fork, and how much water are they releasing from the dam? So you have inflow and release, and what kind of current that creates. Then you look at the weather pattern, in which way the wind is blowing. It's kind of funny. You go out one day and you catch 25 fish, the wind changes directions for the next day, and they won't bite. It's that finicky. Plus, you have pond smelt, which is a little bitty tiny bait fish, and you have shad, which are traditional shad, bait, and then you have different sizes. Where you are on the lake, and it'll be different on the North Fork, it'll be different in the South Fork, and it'll be different on the main body. You have to understand what they're eating, what the variables and conditions, is the barometer going up or going down, because they're very sensitive to barometric pressure. There's so many things that you have to take in consideration when you get on Folsom, and I look at those things before I even hit the water. And then I kind of have a direction of which way I want to go. Is it overcast? Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? Is the wind 5 miles an hour or is the wind 10 miles an hour? That actually is the way to pattern Folsom. Well, most people just go fishing on Folsom. And most people go, I've always caught fish off this rock pile, so I'm going to go to that rock pile. And I'm going to throw this worm. I'm going to go over here. Oh, no, it's a picky lake. My tournament partner and I have dialed in that lake. I've fished it for many, many, many years, to the point where I understand what these fish are doing, where they should be, what they should eat. We throw very specific baits and patterns and techniques, and it changes from day to day. But it's gotten to the point where I don't have to experiment much anymore. I mean, shit, we went out 2 weeks ago, and I spent 3 days on the lake. Day 1, we caught about 24 fish, up to 3 pounds. Day 2, I had 30 fish in my boat. Mark had about 30 fish in his boat. So in 2 different boats, we had 60 fish that day. They were chewing like crazy. It was just amazing. Just a couple of weeks ago. And then we fished a little turkey shoot tournament. We had about 13 pounds. We got lightweight when we weighed in, but we got 4th in that turkey shoot, the Folsom Rats, which is a great group. I'll talk about that in a minute. But, and then certain times a year. I mean, I've caught my best on Folsom is a 9.5. I've got 3 over 9 and a bunch of 7 and 8s. I had a 12 on, lost it. A buddy of mine caught a 14 out there, though, about 17 years ago. 14.6. Monster fish. There's some big fish in that lake. I think if they kept that lake full year round, it'd literally be one of the best bass fishing lakes in California. It's got that potential. It's got huge largemouth in it. It's got big smallmouth in it. It's got big spots in it. I mean, I've caught 20-pound bags of spots, 20-pound bags of largemouth, and 18 to 20-pound bags of smallmouth in that lake over the years. But since they raise the lake level up and down, up and down, up and down all the time, it really hurts that fishery. And when we had that 7-year drought that they really drew the lake down, it really held the lake back. And this year, it's coming back even better than it has in years because we've had rain. But yeah, the problem with that lake is it's so up and down all the time. Those fish really can't settle in and grow really big. But it's a finicky lake. You just have to understand how to do it. If I can't catch, 10's my minimum. If I catch less than 10 fish anytime I go out on that lake, then it's an epic fail. But my goal is always 20 to 25. Catching 3-pounders can be hard sometimes, catching 5 and 6-pounders, but you go out there in the spring, you're catching 15-pound bags, 20-pound bags. But the thing about it is, when I first moved here, if you didn't have 25 pounds on Folsom, you couldn't win. There was 3 tournaments, people had over 30. And guys were catching 12s every year. Now, 15-pound bag's a good bag on Folsom. Anytime you can get 3-pounders. This past tournament, we had 2 3-pounders, and the rest were 2.5s. But, you got to have a kicker right now. So Folsom's changed a lot over the years. The techniques that I've used over the years has changed a lot too. Now with forward-facing sonar, we see so much more. The one thing I like about forward-facing sonar versus traditional sonar, and I rig a ton of boats. In Bass Boat Works, I've rigged many of the pros boats on the West Coast. I helped rig Phil Ducher's boat before he went back, and he's fishing pro back at Guntersville. A lot of the guys out here, they tell me don't give their names away because I rigged little specific things onto their boat. But a lot of them help me, grow the business and promote, but I love rigging. So with forward-facing sonar now, we can literally see what's going on. The one thing about forward-facing sonar, it can be frustrating because you can throw out there and watch 10 fish swipe at your bait and not ever eat it. But what it does do is it helps me go up to a rock pile, scan the rock pile, see if there's any bait fish on top of it. It shows me all the bait fish in the area. It shows me fish there. They may or may not eat. Or if you look at a rock pile and it looks empty, you throw a bait one time out there and let it fall, and you'll see like 6 fish come out of the rocks to eat it. Now you know there's fish there. If you throw your bait in there and it falls down and nothing comes off the rock pile to eat it, you can just cross that off your list of saying, all right, they're not on this rock pile. Let me go to the next one. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. And you'll learn, it saves me pre-fish time. That's the number one thing it does. It saves me pre-fish time. And then when we do get into the fish that we know will eat, we can throw our baits, and how you work your bait is very important. When you're forward-facing sonar fishing, how you work that bait can dictate if you're going to get bit or not. So it helps you figure out how they're eating. And then after that, forward-facing sonar is nice. It can be frustrating though. A lot of people are trying it, and a lot of people don't know how to use it correctly. That's one thing about it, but it has made fishing Folsom a lot easier for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were talking earlier about kind of Folsom being held back from a lot of the water situations we have, and one of the lakes nearby that I always felt like was very similar was Berryessa, just in the sense of, that lake has all 3 species. You can catch a 5-pound smallmouth, a spot, a largemouth, and one of the only things that's really different about both of those lakes is the water level changing all the time. I mean, Folsom seems to really set up to be fertile, to have, the structure, the trees, the rock piles, flat areas like the peninsula, Beals Point, all these places on the lake. But what we don't have is that stable water temperature and water level. So...
Oh, yeah. One thing about Berryessa is I love Berryessa. I think Berryessa is Folsom on steroids. It's the lake that Folsom could be if they kept the water level stable. But, I mean, Berryessa absolutely is one of my favorite lakes. I mean, I caught an 11.4 in a tournament, which is my personal best on Berryessa. I caught a 7.9 spot on Berryessa, and I caught a 6.7 smallmouth on Berryessa. I mean, those fish. And when I first moved here, there was an 18 and a 19 caught out of Berryessa.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was going to produce the world record. And it never produced a 20-pounder, but it definitely put out 2 19s. And that's just amazing. And that lake is so healthy. I mean, if you swap Folsom for Berryessa, I'd be on Berryessa all the time. It's just, it's a bit of a drive. I can be on Folsom in 20 minutes, to get to Berryessa, an hour drive into it, driving down that terrible Highway 80 to get down there.
It's a nightmare going out there. That's why I haven't really been out there the last couple of years, because, you go midweek like I do, you're going to sit in commuter traffic on the way home every single time. Or we can go to Folsom and be home in 10 minutes.
I know, right? Yeah, you're right here. You can be on the water so quick. It is nice to be on the water quick. And you do have to do a little bit of driving. If you want to get to any of our Orville's, an hour or hour and a half probably for you.
Yeah.
Clear Lake's a good 2.5 hour drive. Delta can be close, but Delta's, a tidal waterway. It's totally different fishing. And what's funny is, in Texas, I never changed my gear. I never re-rigged for one lake or the other. It was all the same. I come out here, if I'm fishing Folsom one day, I have to rig all my rods one way. If I go to the Delta, I have to re-rig everything and swap out all my bait boxes in my boat. And it's just like you're constantly swapping out rods and bait boxes and line sizes if you want to go fishing around here.
Yeah, I know we were talking about kind of, people not catching fish out in Folsom. I feel like I've had a lot of comments on my YouTube videos lately. Oh, Folsom's the Dead Sea, especially in the wintertime, and, the people are glad that they're seeing we're catching fish and whatnot. What can you kind of tell the people that are listening, some basic winter patterns and things to look for this time of year as it starts to set up?
Well, I think right now, during the summertime, and it kind of changes if you're talking about largemouth, smallmouth, or spots. The largemouth generally, after the spawn, go super deep and they disappear. In some years, they don't, especially if we have enough water. This year, they didn't disappear. They've stayed shallow. I was catching topwater fish all the way into September. I caught probably over 500 topwater fish this year and a bunch of 5, 6, and 7s, which was pretty amazing. You know, it wasn't a trip I wasn't going out where I didn't have a shot at a 5, 6, or 7 pound largemouth and a couple big spots. Shallow. But then we got into the fall. We haven't had a very cold, we had a very mild summer, and I think that's one of the reasons they stayed up. And we've had a pretty mild winter so far. But about 2 months ago, the fish started just sinking down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So now they were not in 10 feet of water; they're in 30. Right now, almost every fish in the lake's in about 30 to 50 feet. Occasionally, you'll find them up in 20, but they're deeper. So if you're going to go down there for those deeper fish, I mean, jigs have been producing some of the bigger fish, but you're going to drag a jig all day and catch 5 to 7 fish. So we found, and we fished all 3 branches, north, south, and main. I think we caught the most fish on the main. The quantity on the main and the quality was up the rivers a little bit, but you were getting fewer bites. In about 30 to 35 feet, I like to throw tubes. No one throws tubes anymore. Take a green pumpkin tube, throw it out there, drag it about 30 feet around ledges and around rock piles, and you're going to get bit all day long. It's simple as that. We do some of the mid-strolling with the minnows. We do that too. You can just, green pumpkin seems to be the magic color right now, and there's a couple other colors we throw, but a green pumpkin tube, a green pumpkin shaky head along one of the ledges in 35 feet anywhere on the main body is going to get you bit all day. Now, there are windows. Like the ledge, first thing in the morning, you go to it, there's some fish there, but they're not eating very well. You come back at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and between 1 and 3, you catch 10 on your first drag. And you can sit there and just drag back and forth catching. We caught 30 apiece. We were out there. He was catching them. I was catching them. We're out on the main body just dragging ledges. And I was throwing a tube. He was dragging a worm. He was mid-strolling them pretty well in. I tried mid-stroll and I couldn't get him. Mark's a little bit better mid-stroller than me. It was on. And I think you could do that today too. Right now in the middle of winter, because you know where they're at. Now there are some fish, and I always tell people this, 55 degrees. 55 degrees is the key temperature on Folsom. It's been warm. Usually we're at 55 degrees by now. The water temp was 60 a week ago. Now it's probably in the 57 to 59 right now. But when that water temp hits 50, that's when everything changes. It goes into that winter bite. So once that water temp hits 50 and then it starts raining, that is the cutoff for late summer, early fall into winter bite, and it becomes a totally different bite. I'm changing baits, I'm changing techniques, I'm changing location of where I'm catching those fish. Once it starts raining, those fish are going to start coming up from 50 and 35 feet, and they're going to start moving up in the water column somewhere. Now that may be to 20 feet, that may be to 15 feet, but eventually in the wintertime, if it rains enough, if we have a lot of rain, they'll be up in 5 feet of water. But it depends on how much rain we have and how these fronts, because we're supposed to get some sunshine and some rain next week. And I'm working on a couple of boat jobs right now, and I'm just hunkered down. I'm not on Folsom right now because I'm waiting for the rain. The next key thing for me is once it starts raining, Folsom's a 3-day lake. And what do I mean by that? If you're always there the first day on a change, like a storm front comes in and it rains, and then next day it's sunny, it's going to be a tough bite. Because you need 3 days of constant something, constant weather, constant sun for 3 days. From day 3 on, as long as it stays constant, that's the best bite. Rain. It's rain for 3 days. Day 3, you get on the lake. And if it rains for 3 more days, those next 3 days are going to be the best. If whatever it is, it just has to be constant. If the lake, you got to watch the water level of that lake. If it's dropping, it changes the fishing. You have to know if it's rising or dropping. If they stabilize that lake for 3 days, that third day is going to be the best. And then on forward from that. But it's always changing. So I know just by water level, weather, water temp, if it's solid for 3 days, you're going to get the best bite. So if you're trying to catch fish on Folsom, remember that trick. Day 3 of constant something is when those fish will start eating the best. First day after a change is when they eat the worst.
Yeah, I think the 55-degree thing you just brought up is pretty interesting because I was mentioning it in my last video. I usually get on like a pretty decent spoon bite around this time of year, and I've been noticing for whatever reason I just haven't caught any spoonfish. I haven't really caught any fish on a blade bait. I haven't caught any fish on a lot of the techniques I'm normally doing. And one thing I have noticed was I was looking at some of my photos that I have, and a lot of times, my fish finder will be in the background or whatnot. I'll see the water temp, and I'm like, you know what? Like, that lake is just still so hot. It doesn't seem like it's cold enough. And I feel like historically speaking, the lake has had a lot of bait in it this year. And I feel like that bait is still very alive and well. And I feel like once that water starts to get colder, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of that bait starts to die and things just really begin to change. And I think that's been hard for me, as even though it is cold outside or it seems doom and gloomy, that water's still like 57 degrees. The last trip we had was 57 all day long. And I mean, that's warm. That's really warm, especially for the middle of December. And I think that rain coming in, like you said, and just some of those nights, like finally getting to that 40-degree-ish temperature, maybe even dipping a little below that is really going to start to cool the lake down and bring some of those other techniques out that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that spoon bite's been really tough for us. We normally are throwing spoons by now. We can't get them. A-rig bite's been almost impossible to get rolling. Certain baits that should be working right now are not working. It's almost like it's a late summer bite still. And there's a ton of bait. I mean, the amount of bait we're seeing in Folsom right now is pretty astounding. We had such a great hatch on the shad. Seeing more shad than smelt. And a lot of times we'll see more smelt than shad. And you have to change baits and change techniques. But right now it's a lot of shad. And those fish are chowing, and they really need to feed up now because they're going into the wintertime. We caught a spot that looks like it's full of eggs already. And they should be in the first stages of developing their eggs and feeding up, but this spot was pretty far along. Now, most of them are just feeding right now, but they are going to start developing eggs right now, and they're going to start feeding up to get ready for the spawn. There'll be fish, I guarantee you this, fish spawn in January on Folsom. Fish spawn pretty heavily in February on Folsom. By March, you got a big wave coming up, the first wave. But fish will start spawning here in late January, going into February and March. Most fish spawn in April and May and June on Folsom. I've seen fish spawning as late as July 4th. I've caught spawners on July 4th on Folsom. But, that they're feeding up right now. They're hungry, but until that water temp drops, and it kills some of the bait fish off. They become sluggish. They're easier to get to bite. They're falling to the bottom like a spoon. Right now, those fish are scattered out, chasing that bait everywhere, or setting up on ambush points like ledges or rock piles in 35 feet, and that's where they're trying to ambush those bait. But they're not going to, there's windows of opportunity to get those ledge fish and those rock pile fish. If not, they're out in open water just chasing bait all over the place. You can see them on live scope. They're just chasing bait, chasing bait, chasing bait. Well, it's called match the hatch for a reason. If your bait does not come close to simulating what that shad looks like, that's why it's always important to see what they're eating. Then they're going to ignore you. They don't care. They're just going to say, doesn't look real enough to me. I've got 4,000 bait fish in front of me. I'm going to go after those, not your bait. So that's one thing that can make it tough.
Yeah, I think you bringing up the early spawn in Folsom's a pretty interesting point because I feel like historically with us being friends and talking, I feel like every February I'd get a random string of photos from Damon of all these 5 or 6 pound largemouth out of nowhere in February. We'd have one of these weird 65, 70-degree days out of nowhere. I'd be out doing whatever I'm doing. Next thing you know, Damon's on Folsom Lake, and he's sending me big largemouth out of nowhere. And we'll just have those waves, like you said, that they'll move up on the peninsula or wherever, right, just for the afternoon, and you'll snag some of these big ones that look like they're, almost ready to spawn or something, and then all of a sudden the rain comes back in and we go back into the dark for a little while.
Yeah, it's amazing how early they came up. I took my son out on it's Christmas Day one year. We were sitting around, we did Christmas. I'm like, you gonna go fishing tomorrow? And he's like, sure. I had 24 pounds of largemouth for 5. They were all bright green, looked like they'd been up for 3 or 4 weeks in 5 to 7 feet of water in the middle of winter. And they were already preparing now, were they spawning? No. They were the big females. They moved up, and they like to get up their shallow, but it was a warm, sunny day. On day after Christmas. Warm, sunny day. And those fish are already up. They're already thinking about warming because they want to warm their eggs up. Largemouth love to warm their eggs up. Spots, too. Spots will get up and cruise in 5 feet of water all day warming their eggs. And they're just the big females. And then they'll disappear and go back down the minute the next storm front comes in. Then if it gets sunny again, they'll come up, but it's got to be the right conditions. But they are really thinking about spawning starting at the end of December, going into January, and by February, it's on. I mean, I've had some amazing bags of nothing but 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 pounders in February. It's awesome. It's awesome in February, March for sure.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to talk about a little bit of the lore on Folsom. As I feel like there's a lot of great fish that have been caught in Folsom, a lot of big bags, and I feel like it just doesn't have the airtime because guys like yourself and some of those dudes in the Folsom Rats that have been around a long time, people just don't know about it. I know you mentioned that guy you knew caught a 14-pounder from Folsom, and I want to say that was on a jerkbait, right?
Yep, that was a jerkbait.
Yeah.
And then I kind of watched it for like 5 years. There was a 12-pounder caught every year for 5 years before the drought. Once that drought hit, you started seeing not as many big ones being caught. And a lot of those big ones live super deep and they're trout chasers. And they'll come up and spawn, And what's funny about Folsom is most of the fish on that lake spawn in 20 feet. And I'm like, no, they don't spawn that deep. People tell me all the time, no, they don't spawn that deep. They absolutely do. You can see them on forward facing now, but we used to drop the camera down there and, we'd go look at right in the middle of the spawn. We'd go out there and look in 5 feet of water, 10 feet of water, 20, 15 feet of water. And at 20 feet, you would see all the beds. And, and they worry about light penetration. That's not enough light penetration. No, Folsom clears up pretty nice. And even if it's dirty water, they'll still spawn in 20 feet. So you don't see a lot of spawners. A perfect example is when one year we had all that debris come down the lake. I mean, the whole lake was covered with debris. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
And they decided they were going to drop the lake 10 feet to try to trap that debris on the bank. So they dropped the lake, and I was there before they dropped the lake. The day before, I saw 2 spawners on beds. They dropped that lake 10 feet in 48 hours. And I was out there the next day. I saw 150 beds. And I'm like, man, you take 10 feet of water off the top of this lake, you'll see everything. There was beds all over the lake. All over. I mean, it was stupid. I mean, we caught 60 fish off beds that day. Well, you can't do that normally because normally the water is either level or coming up. So they'll make their bed down there, if it's coming up a foot a day, gosh, in 5 days, they made that bed. Now it's covered with 5 more feet of water and they bedded in 15. Now you're 20. But, when you can see them, you'll see where they're bedding and you'll see that they bed deep. And they'll start bedding deep early. And you just don't see a lot of bedding fish on Folsom. And it's because they have no fear of bedding deep.
Yeah, I feel like my best bed fishing year that I've had on the lake so far, and it was really random. I want to say maybe it was like 4 years ago-ish. And it was when we had that low water. It was like a low water spring. The lake was still 5 miles an hour during the springtime. And I remember I would, cruise out from Browns Ravine. I'd go over to the peninsula or I'd go just down the bank towards the levee or whatnot. And there was so much wood in the lake, stumps, because of how low it was from when they cut all those trees down, when they built the reservoir or whatever. And it was like every single stump had a fish on it. And it was so ridiculous, and it was so out of the norm because, like Damon mentioned earlier, I feel like unless you really hit a spot on like the day they moved up, you could find some shallow fish, but you come back a day or two later, the lake's already up 4, 5, 6 feet or whatever, especially in the springtime, they're already gone. But I know for that one spring where we really had level water for quite a while, we finally had some of those shallow fish, and they were just in all those stumps. And I caught so many smallmouth that year too, which I thought was kind of a trip. I think it just had to do with on the main body, there was just so much of that wood accessible for them to go up there and spawn and do their thing. So that was kind of interesting. I know we mentioned the Folsom Rats tournament and just the Folsom Rats chat in general. I kind of wanted to touch on that for a minute. I know especially because a lot of those guys have been your friends for a long time and whatnot. For those of you guys that use Facebook and stuff, we have a Folsom Rats kind of group chat that has a passcode on it, if you will say. So if you want to join it, you got to know a little bit about Folsom Lake to make sure you're the real deal or whatnot. But we have a turkey shoot tournament that they do, New Year's Day tournament, summer tournament, and I know Damon's buddy Shane Pearson puts that on, and it seems like 30 boats every time, maybe more depending.
It depends. I mean, it's usually 20 minimum. Sometimes it's bigger, up to 30. This last time I think we had 25. The New Year's one's fun, and then Shane does them monthly or every 2 weeks all summer long. It's just it's like 40, 50, 60 bucks. It's a great way to go out and just fish during the summertime. We fish for 3 hours. The day after Thanksgiving, we did a 6 or 7 hour tournament. The New Year's Day tournament's great if you're not too hungover.
Right.
But it's just fun. It's camaraderie. We all know each other. We all like to heckle each other. And, this last time, Kent Brown, who has the radio show and, is an icon here on the West Coast, he won. So I heard he was really proud of that win, beating all his buddies. And that's what we do. We just want to beat each other because we're all friends. And, we all respect each other. And we are the guys that spend most of the time on Folsom. I mean, Shane's great on Folsom. I've done good on Folsom. There's just so much fun to do. It's a small club group, but it's fun to get to know everybody. If you're interested in fishing Folsom Lake and you like to tournament fish, the Rats is a great place to be for sure.
Yeah, it's much like the Windy Wednesday Nighters on the Delta. You guys better believe that if you're going to jump in one of these Folsom Rats tournaments, you're going to be fishing against the best fishermen on Folsom Lake. So something to think about, but there's a lot to learn and a lot of good guys to meet through that tournament trail for sure. So stay on the lookout. Next one's going to be that New Year's tournament. So
yep,
we'll see. What do you remember? What it took for the turkey shoot weight wise for first place?
15
pounds. Yeah,
it took 15 and some 13s and 12s, but that was a tough bite. I mean, size right now has been hard. I mean, I think we fished for probably between my tournament partner and I, we had 10 days on the water, and the biggest one that was caught was like a 4-pounder between the two of us. And I caught some solid 3s, but there was not much size caught in that tournament. I think there was a 493 and maybe a 5-pounder between 25 guys. And so the bigger fish have been a little tougher to find. I think because they're eating different bait than all the 3-pounder and smaller fish. You can go out there and catch a ton of 1.5 to 2-pounders. That day I caught 30. I would say only 5 of them were over 2.5 pounds, and everything else was like 1.9 to 2.2. And just, it's fun, but the size has been missing. Whereas a month ago, we were catching at least a 4 or 5-pounder every time we went. For 3 months before that, especially at the end of that topwater bite. And I think those bigger fish are just chasing different stuff. They're chasing trout, to be honest with you. There's just so much bait in there. I think they get tired of chasing those shad, and they start. I think a lot of times what they do is they'll let the smaller fish hit those shad, and they will sit under those bait balls and just go along the bottom, slurping up the shad that are injured.
Yep.
And then they get fat and lazy, and they don't want to work as hard as those smaller fish, and they fill up quick. They'll sit there and slurp up a bunch of those shad. They're sitting there fat and happy. You throw a bait bite in, they go, nah, thanks, I'm full. Or they're out there chasing trout. Those bigger fish definitely chase trout. So I caught 2 years ago, I was throwing a HUD, and I threw it up in there, and I stuck an 8.5 largemouth, got it in the net, and out of its mouth, it spit up a brand new, fresh 1 pound trout. So it had just eaten a 1 pound trout, and then it ate my hud afterwards. And what was funny is I looked down at his gullet, and there was a tail sticking out. He had another trout in him. So he ate 3 1 pound trout in one sitting. That's how they are. But those big ones, they're not eating our little baits. They're chasing the trout. And sometimes Shane gets on a swim bait bite. It can be stupid. He catches a lot of big fish on swim baits. I've caught a lot of big fish on swim baits too. But, you may go through it all day long and not get bit either. So it's one of those catch-22s.
Yeah, I know, we just posted a video on the channel talking about a little bit of swim bait fishing on Folsom Lake. And for those of you guys listening, I feel like a lot of people don't pay as much attention to some of the trout stuff that's going on at Folsom Lake. And I think it's worth, we have a little Folsom Lake fishing report group on Facebook as well that you guys can kind of hop in and see what the deal is. But, they plant king salmon like fry every year on Folsom. That nobody talks about that. There's trout that get planted in the lake a lot as well, and that's something that I think just doesn't get a lot of time. And you guys can kind of stay in touch by looking at that chat, because you'll see we'll get like these little flurries where those king salmon guys start catching a bunch of them or catching rainbows or whatever the case is, and when that lake starts to turn over, especially when it gets cold this time of year, a lot of those trout start to go shallow, and I'm sure a lot of those big largemouth are close behind them. So
yeah, you're actually one of the better swim bait fishermen on Folsom, believe it or not. You go out there all the time, you dedicate yourself to it, you catch big ones. You may not get a bunch, but you've dedicated yourself to mastering the swim bait on Folsom. So you're actually probably one of the better swim bait fishermen on Folsom, to be honest with you, from what I've seen and the big ones you've hooked into. Yeah, you and I need to spend a day. I'll sit back and watch you throw a swim bait all day.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like we were just talking about, you're maybe looking for 3 opportunities a day, right? Not 3 bites, just 3 opportunities. And, I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but that's one of those things for me personally. I haven't really caught any fish over maybe 7 pounds on Folsom, not on a swim bait for me. They've all been on a swim bait. I have, 1 over 9 and 3 over 8 and a handful of other good ones that have come on the swim bait. And something else that's worth noting that I think is interesting that we talked about earlier on the show with just the health of the lake is of the big ones that I've caught, they've all been, in my opinion, double digits that weren't double digits. They just didn't have the frame. Now, maybe if I caught that fish in Berryessa or Clear Lake, that fish would have been well over 10 pounds. But just due to the nature of Folsom Lake, a lot of these fish just aren't kind of in the right spot. I remember I caught a spot on the peninsula one time. It was 624 is my personal best spotted bass. I caught it on a deep diving crankbait, and I measured that fish at 24 inches long. And I mean, that's a monster spot. I mean, that's a huge spot. I remember when I was looking at it, I thought it was maybe a 10-pound spot, and I got in the net and I was like, God, this thing's so skinny, and ended up being 6.5 pounds or whatever, which is a huge fish. But I feel like there's a lot of fish in Folsom that are like that, where they're old, angry old fish, and they just never had a nice break, a clean break to get the food they need and stay super giant. I feel like we just don't have as many opportunities at some of those fish as you would maybe in Clear Lake or Berryessa, somewhere that is a little more stable water level wise. So, but yeah, we're going to start to wrap it up here. Like I said earlier, Damon does a lot of different things, so we're going to take a second and kind of talk about that. Obviously, he has his Bass Boat Works, which is based out of Roseville. If you want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah. Right now I'm doing a carpet job. I got to say, carpet jobs are not my favorite thing to do. I'm a Mercury technician. There's no outboard motor I haven't worked on. I do a lot of services in the spring. People start bringing me their boat for service. Make sure you service your boat every year. The one thing I tell people all the time, and I see it coming in, they're like, they haven't touched their boat in 3 years, and they bring it into me. I'm like, did you at least stabilize the gas before you stored it? No. Well, our gas has ethanol in it. Ethanol, evaporates and absorbs moisture into there, and your gas will turn yellow, and it starts breaking down in like 30 days. Gas in California. It's made for cars, not for boats. So stabilize your gas. But even oil turns acidic. You got to keep your boat serviced. So yearly service is all it takes. Just once a year. I do a lot of service jobs. I do a lot of rigging jobs. Everyone who got their graphs as presents for Black Friday,
Yep.
which is the best time to buy graphs all year. A lot of those people bring me a bunch of different graphs, live scopes, trolling motors, wiring. I do all the rewiring. I do all the electrical work on boats. I love doing that. It's great. But also working on the outboards, doing the service on them, troubleshooting problems. You guys can give me a call if you need your boat serviced. You can give out my number. It's 916-531-2996. Just shoot me a text. Let me know what boat you have, and I'll get you on the schedule for doing some service. It's going to get busy. Usually by March, it kind of goes nuts. And most shops book out. I mean, the golden mussel thing has been a big deal here in Northern California, and we could probably dedicate an entire show to that alone. But it was kind of nice in the fact that there weren't as many boats on the lake. Having to get decontaminated for each individual lake instead of having a universal decontamination, has been a problem. So a lot of us you almost need two boats now, one for your favorite lake and one to go elsewhere. So you don't have to get decontaminated. But I think the people are kind of getting used to it now. And I'll be doing a lot of service over the next 2 or 3 months. But this next month in January is probably the best time to get the boat in, get ahead of the crowd. I've got 2 boats I'm doing. I do some fiberglass work, and I do some carpeting. I try not to back carpeting jobs. I like to, especially once we get into service, because I'll be servicing 2 or 3 motors a day and getting people in and out so they can go get on the water. But make sure check your batteries. It's amazing how many people bring me their boat and their batteries are dead, and they go, I don't know what's wrong. Buy a multimeter and check your battery. Take your negative plug cable off your battery, store it for the winter, keep it charged and topped off, and check it. Batteries last about 3 to 5 years. If you have a battery that lasts over 5 years, you got a really nice battery. But batteries, it's got to be 12.5 volts or more once it's charged and rested for an hour, 12.5 or more, 12.6 preferably. If it is less than that on any of your batteries, trolling motor battery, starting battery, your battery is starting to get weak. Once it hits about 12.3 or 12.4 at resting stage after fully charged, it's time to think about replacing that battery. So stuff like that. We'll be doing a lot of that this spring and getting guys ready to go out on the lake.
Yeah, and then I know as far as your guide business and any of the dance lessons, are you still offering those to people?
I don't guide regularly anymore. If I get someone that wants a special trip or something like that, I'll do it. But no, I'm not guiding a lot anymore. As far as the swing dance lessons, I took a little bit of a break this summer from teaching as much. I used to teach 6 lessons a week. Everything on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 lessons per night, 1-hour lessons. And I think I've been a couple months since I've taught. But I am getting ready to do it a little more. If someone's interested in getting some swing dance lessons, it's true country swing. No line dancing, no East Coast, West Coast. It's true country swing. So, yeah, if anyone wants to, they feel free to give me a call. I mean, I do it. I only do couples, no singles anymore. And someone wants to learn, they can hit me up.
For sure. All right, cool, man. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm sure we're going to catch up with you again soon and kind of see what's going on. I know once it starts to get a little bit nicer out, he's going to be busy cranking away the boats a bunch. But once we get on the lake, we'll probably have some videos coming soon, hopefully, and we'll get you back on the podcast, man.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go shoot some videos on Folsom.
Awesome, man. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
All right, so we just wrapped up the episode with Damon. It was pretty fun. I feel like we talked about a lot of cool stuff, especially some of the Folsom Lake nuances and whatnot. He has a ton of experience out here. I mean, over 25 years at this point on Folsom Lake, which is pretty unheard of. I feel like a lot of the older guys that are out here doing it, they're not super down to really talk about exactly what's going on Folsom. Lots of secrets and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we'll have him back on the show for sure, talk about Folsom a little bit more, especially as spring comes around and some of those other things. But super appreciative for Damon to come on. Damon's been around for as long as I can remember with my fishing journey and whatnot, and he's really spent a lot of time, giving back to the high school and just the community in general. So I'd definitely tell you guys, if you guys are looking for a stand-up guy to do some work on your boat and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he's pretty much as good as he gets as a person when it comes to that. So I would definitely give him a shout out and support him if you guys are local and you have any boats or any dance lessons or whatever. It's pretty funny. I feel like just talking about some of the different things he does, but I mean, I remember back when I used to help him on the boat, there was people coming to do those dance lessons all the time, and I don't know anything about it, but I used to always laugh because I was like, this is so weird. Like, this guy is like a big bass fisherman, and he's working on these boats during the day. I was helping him at the time, and then there was just all these people coming in for these dance lessons and to his house to do it, right? Which he has a pretty beautiful piece of property. So it is kind of fun, but I mean, he must be pretty good at it because he was having people coming all the time. So if that's something else you guys would be interested in, definitely hop on that. And if you guys like the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know if you guys have any other guests that you want to hear from, and we'll get them on the show. So talk to you later.